There's this moment, and I know you felt it, where someone who used to light up when they saw you, someone who used to text you first, someone who used to make you feel like you mattered, just stops. Not with a fight, not with an explanation, not even with a goodbye. They just go cold. And the worst part isn't the silence itself. The worst part is that you can feel it happening in real time, and you have no idea why. You replay the last conversation in your head. You scroll through old messages looking for a clue. You ask yourself what you did wrong. And the more you search for an answer, the more confused you get, because nothing obvious happened. Nothing changed, at least not on the surface. But something shifted. Something inside them moved, quietly, invisibly, and by the time you noticed, they were already halfway gone. Most people think this is about them. They think they said something wrong, pushed too hard, or weren't enough. And I understand that instinct, because when someone pulls away, the most natural reaction in the world is to look inward and try to fix whatever broke. But here's the thing most people never consider. What if it was never about you at all? What if the moment someone goes cold, what you're actually witnessing is something happening entirely inside their own mind? A process that started long before you ever noticed, and one that follows a pattern so consistent, so predictable, that once you understand it, you will never experience that kind of confusion the same way again. That's what this video is about. And I need you to stay with me, because what I'm going to walk you through today will change the way you read people, the way you respond to silence, and maybe even the way you understand yourself. If this kind of content resonates with you, take a second right now to subscribe and leave a like. It helps more than you know, and it tells me to keep making videos like this one. Now let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand is that when someone suddenly becomes distant, you are not witnessing a decision. You are witnessing a reaction. And there is a massive difference between the two. A decision is conscious. It's something a person thinks through, weighs, and then acts on. But emotional withdrawal, that cold shift you feel when someone pulls away, almost never starts as a decision. It starts as a feeling, a sensation in the body, a tightness in the chest, a subtle, almost invisible impulse to protect something inside that feels threatened. And the person experiencing it often doesn't even know it's happening. Psychologists call this emotional deactivation. It's a process where the nervous system, in response to perceived emotional risk, begins to shut down the channels that allow closeness. Think of it like a circuit breaker in a house. When too much energy flows through the system, the breaker trips, not to destroy the connection, but to protect the wiring from burning out. That's what happens inside someone when they go cold. Their emotional system is not rejecting you. It is protecting itself. And most of the time, it is protecting itself from something that has nothing to do with you. Now this is where it gets deeper, and this is the part most people miss entirely. When someone deactivates emotionally, they don't just pull away from you. They pull away from themselves. They lose access to the part of them that feels warmth, that feels longing, that feels connected. And from the outside, that looks like indifference. It looks like they don't care. But on the inside, something very different is happening. On the inside, there's often a storm. There's confusion, guilt, numbness, sometimes even grief, because a part of them knows they're drifting, and they don't know how to stop it. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human relationships. We assume that coldness means absence of feeling. But in many cases, coldness is actually the result of too much feeling. The system gets overwhelmed. The emotional load becomes too heavy, and the only way the mind knows how to cope is to shut everything down. Not selectively. Not carefully. Everything. And that includes the feelings they had for you. Let me give you a picture of how this works on a deeper level. There's a concept in psychology known as the window of tolerance. It's the zone in which a person can function, feel, connect, and engage without becoming emotionally dysregulated. When someone is inside their window of tolerance, they can handle closeness, vulnerability, even conflict, without shutting down. But when something pushes them outside that window, whether it's stress, fear, unresolved trauma, or even just emotional exhaustion, their nervous system switches into survival mode. And in survival mode, connection is not a priority, safety is. So when someone who was warm suddenly becomes unreachable, what you might actually be seeing is a person who has been pushed outside their window of tolerance by something you may not even be aware of. It could be pressure at work. It could be a family situation. It could be an old wound that got triggered by something small. Something you said without meaning to, something that landed differently than you intended. And instead of talking about it, instead of processing it, their system chose the fastest route to safety, which is disconnection. And here's what makes this even more complex. The people who are most likely to go cold without warning are often the ones who felt the most deeply to begin with. That might seem contradictory, but it's not. People who feel intensely are also the ones whose systems are most easily overwhelmed. They give a lot, they absorb a lot, and when the emotional cost of being open becomes too high, their withdrawal is equally intense. The warmth doesn't fade gradually. It vanishes. And it leaves the other person standing there wondering what just happened. Now, I want to pause here and be honest with you about something. Even though this narration uses an AI voice, I am a real person behind this channel. My name is Fernando, and I genuinely appreciate you being here right now. I hope you are blessed beyond anything you can imagine. Now, let me continue, because what comes next is something I think you really need to hear. There's another layer to this that most people never talk about, and it has to do with attachment patterns. The way someone learned to bond as a child directly shapes how they handle closeness as an adult. And for people with what psychologists call an avoidant attachment style, emotional withdrawal isn't a flaw. It's a learned survival strategy. At some point in their early life, they learned that closeness comes with a cost. Maybe they were punished for being vulnerable. Maybe they were ignored when they needed comfort. Maybe they learned that the safest way to exist in a relationship was to never need anyone too much. And so they built an internal system that automatically pulls them back the moment a connection starts to feel too real, too close, too important. This is critical to understand, because when someone with this pattern goes cold on you, it often means the opposite of what you think. It doesn't mean they stopped caring. It often means they started caring too much, and their system flagged that as dangerous. The closeness itself became the threat, and their withdrawal is not a rejection of you. It is a rejection of the vulnerability that comes with wanting you. Let me say that again, because I don't want you to miss it. Sometimes the reason someone pulls away is precisely because they feel something real, and the realness of it terrifies them. Not because of who you are, but because of what closeness has meant in their past. Their body remembers a time when letting someone in led to pain. And even if their conscious mind knows you're different, their nervous system doesn't care about logic. It cares about patterns. And the pattern says, this is where it gets dangerous, so shut it down. But I don't want you to romanticize this, and this is where I need to shift into something more serious. Because while everything I've just described is real, and while understanding it can help you respond with more clarity and less anxiety, there is also a version of this behavior that is not about internal struggle at all. There is a version where someone goes cold because they have simply made a choice. Not an unconscious reaction, not a nervous system response. A deliberate, quiet decision to step back without giving you the honesty of telling you why. And this is the harder truth. Sometimes the coldness you feel is not a wall someone built to protect themselves. It's a door they closed because they no longer want to walk through it, and the silence isn't confusion. It's an answer. One they don't have the courage or the care to say out loud. Recognizing the difference between these two situations is one of the most important emotional skills you can develop. Because if you treat every withdrawal as a wound that needs your healing, you will exhaust yourself trying to save connections that were already gone. And if you treat every withdrawal as rejection, you will abandon people who were only trying to protect themselves long enough to come back. So how do you tell the difference? There are patterns. And once you learn to see them, you will never unsee them. When someone withdraws because of an internal emotional process, there are usually signs of conflict in their behavior. They pull away, but they don't fully disappear. They might go quiet for a while, but then send a small message, something short, almost testing whether the door is still open. They may seem distant in conversation, but their body language still carries traces of warmth, brief eye contact, a slight lean in your direction, a hesitation before they leave. These are signals that the connection is still alive inside them, even if they can't fully access it. Their withdrawal has a texture of struggle to it. It's not clean, it's not smooth. It's messy, because they are fighting something inside themselves. But when someone has made a quiet decision to leave, the withdrawal is different. It's organized, it's consistent. There's no push and pull. There's no moment of warmth followed by distance. There's just distance. Steady, unbroken, almost polite distance. They respond, but only when necessary. They engage, but without depth. And the thing that gives it away most clearly is the absence of emotional residue. There's no guilt in their tone, no awkwardness, no tension. Just a flat, neutral space where intensity used to live. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that the discomfort you feel in the relationship is entirely yours. They are not uncomfortable. And that asymmetry, that imbalance of emotional weight, is the clearest sign that the withdrawal is not temporary. It is a transition. Now, there's something else I want you to consider, something that goes even deeper than attachment or nervous system responses, and it's this. Sometimes, the reason someone goes cold is not because of anything happening between you and them. It's because of something happening between them and themselves. People go through invisible seasons. Seasons of doubt, of identity crisis, of quiet internal collapse that no one around them can see. And during those seasons, they don't have the emotional bandwidth to maintain the version of themselves that showed up in your relationship. The person who was warm, engaged, present, that version of them required energy. And when their internal reserves run dry, that version disappears. Not because it was fake, but because it was unsustainable in the state they're in. This is something people rarely consider. We tend to think of personality as fixed. We think that's who they are, or that's who they were, as if people are static things that either care or don't. But the truth is that people are systems. Complex, shifting, vulnerable systems. And those systems fluctuate depending on what's happening beneath the surface. Someone can genuinely love you and still not have the capacity to show it. Someone can want to be close to you and still feel the need to disappear. And someone can go cold not because the warmth was a lie, but because the weight of carrying it became too heavy. And this brings us to something most people are afraid to face. The question that sits beneath every experience of sudden coldness. The question you've probably been asking yourself since the beginning of this video, even if you haven't said it out loud. Is it me? And the honest answer, the one that most people won't tell you, is that sometimes, yes, it is partly about you. Not because you're flawed, not because you did something unforgivable, but because your presence in their life may have triggered something they weren't ready to face. Your closeness may have reminded them of a need they've been trying to suppress. Your warmth may have exposed a part of them that feels broken. And instead of sitting with that discomfort, they ran from it. Not from you. From what you made them feel about themselves. That is one of the most painful realities of human connection. That sometimes the better you are to someone, the faster they pull away, because your goodness becomes a mirror. And not everyone is ready to look at what that mirror reflects. But here's what I want to leave you with, and I want you to really hear this. The way someone handles their internal world is not your responsibility. You can be compassionate. You can be understanding. You can hold space for someone's process without losing yourself in it. But you cannot fix what someone refuses to face. And you cannot keep the door open forever for someone who keeps choosing to walk away from it. What you can do, though, is this. You can learn to read the patterns. You can learn to recognize when withdrawal is a cry for space and when it's a quiet goodbye. You can learn to respond with clarity instead of panic, with boundaries instead of begging, with understanding instead of obsession. And most importantly, you can learn that someone going cold does not diminish your warmth. Their inability to receive what you offer says nothing about the value of what you carry. The next time someone close to you suddenly shifts, before you spiral, before you chase, before you rewrite the story in your head 100 times, pause. Take a breath. And ask yourself not what you did wrong, but what might be happening inside them that they haven't found the words for yet. Because behind the coldness, behind the silence, behind the distance, there is almost always a human being struggling with something they don't fully understand themselves. And understanding that, truly understanding that, is the difference between reacting from fear and responding from wisdom. It is the difference between losing yourself in someone else's process and standing firm in your own. And it is, perhaps, the most important thing you will ever learn about the people you love. If this shifted something in you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. I'll see you in the next one.